Hi, and welcome to the latest in Digital Spy's video reviews of the biggest movie releases around.
What up, dorks?
This time we're looking at Spider-Man Far From Home, and it's going to be a completely spoiler-free look at the new MCU movie.
What?
If you like what you see, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel below for more of our video content. I'm Ian, and the furthest I've been away from home is Montreal.
I'm Morgan, and the farthest I've been from home is California, I think. California. Is that far?
It's far enough, I
Sounds
feel.
far.
Yeah.
Bitch, please, you've been to space.
So as we said, this is going to be a completely spoiler-free look at the final movie of Marvel's Phase 3. So all we can really say is that after the events of Avengers Endgame, Peter Parker just really fancies a break from the whole superhero life and thinks he can just go on a school trip around Europe with his friends and not have to worry about anything. Little does he know, Nick Fury comes along with a new threat to face, and soon Peter Parker has to team up with Mysterio to battle the threatening elements. Now Morgan, I know before this there was one particular thing about this film you were worried about.
Well, I thought this film had a really tough challenge to surmount in that going to see this movie, I wanted it to be both a really fun, sort of lightweight Spider-Man movie, like Homecoming, but I also wanted it to, of course, to explore some of the consequences of Avengers Endgame. And I was concerned, I was like, can it do both? And I have to say, I was, without giving anything away, I was pleased with how it tackled it. There's a slight lightness of touch at points to how it deals with the ramifications of Endgame, but it does manage to explore those themes whilst also giving us just a terrific Spider-Man movie on top of it.
You gonna be the next Iron Man now?
Well, no, I don't have time. I'm too busy doing your jobs.
And for me, the thing that surprised me is that it was funnier than I expected. Like, Homecoming was funny, and you expect it from Tom Holland's Peter Parker because he's all excitement and all fun. But even this, there are gags at the expense of the snap in Endgame, which took me by surprise. And then it still does delve into the fact that, Spider-Man's lost his mentor, he's lost Iron Man, and I feel it really connects with those emotional moments, but they don't overshadow the fact that it's its own film. Like, it can't just be Endgame.
No, but it's a really delicate tonal balance to, you've got to pay off the emotional impact of Endgame whilst also still giving us a fun, frothy Spider-Man movie. And it manages to do both, which really impressed me.
I think MJ really likes me. That reminds me when I first fell in love.
You're a very difficult person to contact, Spider-Man.
Personally, I thought part of that balance was Tom Holland's extremely likeable performance, because I think he carries on being just the perfect on-screen Spider-Man.
No, 100%. I think as well, like, a lot of times in the Avengers movies, his performance, not his fault, but the way it's written, it's a little kind of one note. It's very much just this wide-eyed excitement. He's the, the little naive kid. And here he does get to play that. He gets to play that kind of that sense of fun, but he also gets to deal with some slightly heavier material as well. And that kind of, his performance very much reflects the tonal balance of the movie.
Yeah, and I think it's in his blossoming relationship with MJ and Zendaya. I just thought they were adorable together. Like, it gave me flashbacks to like my awkward teen romances and kind of like, we're quite sure, because he is like racked by guilt, and you kind of think, is he? How can you be? You're like Spider-Man. You should have full confidence. But I think they play it perfectly, and I think they're the emotional backbone of the film for me. Absolutely.
Zendaya has a lot more to do in this movie. I think it's fair to say than she did in Homecoming. Peter and MJ's relationship is far more at the core of this movie than it was in the last one. And their chemistry is absolutely fantastic. Again, it's one of the things that really carries the movie through. Yeah, and there was one person you thought was a bit let down by this. Well,
this
not let down necessarily, but Jacob Batalon as Ned. They do their best with him in this movie, but because the focus has shifted more from Peter and Ned's friendship to Peter and MJ's sort of budding romance, Ned maybe doesn't get as much to do in this movie, but I guess that's just a natural progression with the way these movies are going. Yeah, at the end of the day, it runs like a quite breezy 2 out of 10, and you kind of wouldn't want it to be longer. And if it had to do that kind of thing, I was okay with it sort of sacrificing a little bit of that, because it just moves at such a pace all throughout, I feel. And something else I loved about this movie as well is the fact that it does manage to balance not just being a great Spider-Man movie with the consequences of Endgame, but it's also just a terrific sort of teen film as well. It's a great sort of like road trip teen romance as well.
Yeah. Whereas the first one, like Homecoming, was more like John Hughes high school comedy, and it feels like they've taken just another frame of that.
Yeah, it's like a different part of the genre, that kind of like teen road trip movie.
It's not just the younger cast in this film as well, because Samuel L. Jackson takes over the Robert Downey Jr. role of being Spider-Man's mentor in this film as Nick Fury, and I thought it showed a really interesting side to him. Like we got in Captain Marvel, we got to learn a bit more about Nick Fury, and here, because he's come back into a world that's 5 years later, this super spy who knows everything and suddenly doesn't. He doesn't know anything, and then all of a sudden in comes this Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who seems to know more about this new world after Endgame. And I thought their little relationship worked, and Gyllenhaal's with Spider-Man, I thought he was just a perfect addition to this world.
Yeah, Gyllenhaal's great. You know, he gets a few different shades to play, as does Samuel L. Jackson. You know, I feel like in the early MCU movies, Fury was a lot more straight-laced.
Yeah.
And it feels like, especially since Captain Marvel, and it continues in this movie, we get to see a little more humour from Fury, and I feel like that's the way they're kind of driving that character.
Yeah, he's sort of come a little bit of fish out of water, even though you would never really think it. But yeah, it's great, and I think Samuel Jackson does it perfectly.
Well, he can play the slightly more straight-laced, you know, like the sort of gruff boss character. But also we know like he nails the comedy as well. So yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
You're right, you may not be ready, but this is my responsibility. Saving the world requires sacrifice. Sometimes people die.
I just always feel like I'm putting my friends in danger. The world needs the next Iron Man.
You're going to step up or not?
I think the other thing Far From Home does really well is that I felt that the big action scenes, they had a slightly different feel to them because of these elementals who are these massive monsters, not to be confused with Hydra Man and that, but they're just these massive monsters built out of water, air, and fire. And I think they look really well, and like they're generally, sometimes CGI can feel a bit weightless, even in MCU films, and these kind of felt like there were stakes because his friends are always involved somewhere along the lines.
Yeah, no, the action sequences in this film are really visually inventive, I thought as well. There's only so many ways, arguably, you can end a superhero movie or play like a climactic action sequence in a superhero movie, but actually I feel like this did find a new twist on it. I feel like that's one of the things in superhero movies and MCU movies in particular that comes in for a lot of criticism is the action scenes, that they're quite repetitive. But actually, I do feel like Far From Home did push it in new directions.
Yeah, it feels like each one's got a slightly different flavour. And for me, the very climactic one does get a little bit explosion-y heavy. And you're like, oh, there's another one, and there's another one. And you kind of lose track a little bit of what's happening and why. But that's a complaint you can land at most superhero films. It didn't derail it for me because there is still that personal connection. Just because, you know, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is just so adorable. Like you just want to be on his side in any action scene, and that adds to any flavour compared to any other superhero film around, I feel, at the moment. But as much as obviously we both really liked about this film, there was one element you came out with afterwards, Morgan, that you didn't feel worked quite well for you.
Well, I do feel that they've expanded on a lot of the elements from Homecoming successfully. So you know, like Zendaya's performance and Tom Holland as Spider-Man. I do feel like the two teacher characters played by Martin Starr and JB Smoove, they had relatively small roles in Homecoming. You know, the odd funny line here and there, great. They have really expanded their roles in this movie. They're very much the comic relief of the movie, and I'll be honest, not all of their moments land. I feel like there's an over-reliance on those two characters in particular. I think they're sort of over... they think the audience has more of an investment in those two teacher characters than we do. I think they think we find them hilarious. I could have done with a little less of those.
Especially like a little weird banter between them. Like it never quite worked in some ways, and it's just like there are the moments where you're like, okay, let's move on a little bit. Like it doesn't overtake it, but there are they stand out the most because there are other gags in this film that I feel don't work, but they happen so fast.
Exactly. The jokes in this movie come so thick and fast that for the most part, the odd duff joke you forgive, but those are the two characters where they're almost got often their own little subplot, and there are a lot of running gags with those characters that just don't work and get repeated over and over again. And you could really have cut back those two characters in this movie, and I think it would have benefited from that.
Yeah, you wouldn't have lost anything.
You wouldn't have lost anything.
Beck is from Earth, just not ours. The snap tore a hole in our dimension.
You're saying there's a multiverse?
We have a job to do, and you're coming with us.
But even for that little minor complaint about the film, I kind of feel that this film, it's got so much in there for Spider-Man comic fans, Spider-Man movie fans who haven't watched the other MCU films, but also for MCU fans as well. Like there's plenty of references and callbacks that everyone will note out. and really it's as good as you could ever hope it would be, considering everything on it.
Absolutely. I think given the weight of expectation, post Avengers Endgame, but also after Homecoming, which people loved, I went into this film a little bit like, oh, can it possibly deliver on all those fronts?
Yeah.
And this is not like a perfect movie. It doesn't nail every single element, but it gets enough right. And I was really impressed with how it managed to balance all those elements. I agree. I think like it's about as good as it possibly could be.
Yeah. And how do you feel it compares to Homecoming? Because for me, they're pretty much on par, but this sort of sneaks a little bit in front of it. I feel it's a more confident film this time round.
It's interesting. I feel like certain aspects of it improve on Homecoming, and other aspects don't quite match up. So I'd say they're about on a par for me, which, given how much I enjoyed Homecoming, it says a lot about Far From Home. I think, as I say, like certain characters don't get quite as much time in the limelight, but others get more. So it's just a bit of a trade-off.
There's gotta be someone else you can use. What about Thor?
Off-world.
Captain Marvel. Unavailable. But I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Bitch, please, you've been to space.
What do you want, Peter?
I want to go back on my trip with the girl who I really like and tell her how I feel. MJ,
I'm Spider-Man.
No, of course I'm not.
I mean, it's kind of obvious.
Spider-Man Far From Home is out in cinemas on July 2nd. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to our channel below for more of our video content. Thanks, bye.